Thank you all. Thank you all for being here tonight with me. I feel very honored to see familiar faces as well as faces that I haven't seen before and names that people I haven't yet met. And it really was a very profound moment actually for me in Iona when I met with Margaret, which maybe I'll share with you later. It was not part of the stories tonight, but it probably changed the direction of my life for the next decade or so, if I'm blessed to live for the next decade or so. I'll maybe share that with you. And actually, I've really enjoyed joining you all in the past few weeks. And I'm just super excited to have the chance to share with you tonight. I've joined the alignment community. Really, it was just in kind of prep for this evening, sort of saying, oh, I wonder what happens when you at these alignment meetings. But I've enjoyed them so much that I think, probably I'm going to be with you quite regularly, whether I'm a presenter or not a presenter. They've really been such uplifting and joyful occasions and quite meaningful. Um, and I was trying to think what I had to offer, and one of the things that I really love is telling stories. So I think probably tonight, mostly it will be just some stories from my life, but probably stories that I feel have had a deep meaning to me. And the stories that I really enjoy the most, the ones that I really enjoy telling the most, are stories that sort of demonstrate really deeply to me how we are connected, really connected, both with each other and with the divine, whatever we perceive that to be. So, within my own faith tradition as a Baha'i, we sometimes describe those kind of incredible wow moments, that those moments where you think, how did that happen? How can this possibly be? How can this connection have happened by accident? We usually call those um, moments of confirmation, where you feel very confirmed. I guess it's confirmation that God exists and that the divine is with us on our journey, all our journeys of discovery. But before I begin with the stories, I really want to begin by acknowledging that sometimes on the road to divine confirmations, of whatever faith tradition you're from, sometimes what we're facing can seem so hard and that we struggle, we ask why, we get exhausted, just waiting for that confirmation, that moment of clarity and relief. And so I really wanted to just begin by saying, although I'm going to share stories where there was moments of clarity for me, that sometimes when we pray again and we seek answers again and again, they don't always come. They don't always come, certainly they don't always come immediately, and they don't always come in the way that we expect them to come. So I'm going to just ask Margaret if she'll play the first piece of music. And this is two young Baha'i girls that are just setting out on their musical career. And I really love the way that they share this song. And I hope you enjoy it too. Apologies, the internet wasn't just the best, but it's such a sweet song really about the struggle when we pray and we don't hear an answer, and how we have to maintain our faith and hang in there. And so this first story for me is really about one of those moments. Um and it has an interfaith element to it, which I hope that will resonate with all of you. So some years ago now, I was reading a book, and it was a book called Soldiers of Light, and it was written by a journalist called Daniel Bergner. I think that's how you might say his name. It was actually a really deeply shocking book about the civil war in Sierra Leone. And by the end of the book, I really felt traumatized. I mean, I felt traumatized by the brutality. I felt traumatized by the suffering. Basically, it was a book I almost wished I hadn't read. It was so disturbing. And I found myself on reading the book feeling really angry, actually feeling really angry with God and having this overwhelming sense of, if there's this level of suffering and you're a God that loves us. How can that be? You know, how can there be this level of suffering that almost seems unbearable? Um, and in my anger, I decided that, okay, I was going to blank God, that God, I just wasn't going to have anything to do with God. And so this went on for a few days where I was like, I'm not going to pray. I'm not going to, you know, just have nothing to do with God because of what I'd just read. But having become a Baha'i at 17, I'd been saying prayers every day since then and actually found it really difficult not to pray. So instead, I thought I'll just from the depth of my heart ask God to show me something, just something that would make sense of that suffering, of that war, of what I just read. And you know, I mean, I'm sure we all pray sincerely all the time, but this was one of those prayers where it was really, 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 really wanted an answer. You know, I felt it was critical to even my understanding of the universe and how it worked and God's place in it and my place in it. It was one of those kind of prayers. And then I let go. I just said that any time, any place, anywhere, just at some point, give me a little glimpse of light that makes sense of this. A week later, I was at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh, which probably Mamie and Linda know quite well. And I was at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh because we were hosting a youth conference, and the young people that were co-planning the youth interfaith youth conference with me said they wanted to have a storytelling session. So, you know, I absolutely thought, right, best place to go is to a storytelling centre, and you know, get a professional to come in and work with the young people. So I duly went to the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh on the Royal Mile there, and sitting opposite me was an African, a lovely African man who was a storyteller who was going to, uh, you know, run the storytelling workshop. And I said, "Hi, you know, what's your name? Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, my name is Amadou Wurai Khan." And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Sierra Leone." Now, this was actually just a week after having read this book. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to have to just be very straightforward with him here. I said, you know, I've just read a book about your country and about the civil war that was happening there. And I was really traumatized by it. In fact, it probably tested my faith a bit. And I said, you know, is there anything that you can share with me from your experience there? He'd escaped from Sierra Leone. And he told me an incredible story. He said, actually, I'm going to tell you a story of a Christian minister who, when the rebels were coming into Freetown, stood in front of the door of the mosque and said that this is a holy place and these are godly people, you know, because the war was a little had elements of interreligious strife between it. He stood there very, very bravely. Um, and I think despite the fact he did end up being killed. But from lots of people had witnessed what this brave man had done. And there was an interreligious council in Sierra Leone. This is what Amadou told me. And he said it was the Interreligious Council of Sierra Leone that helped put an end to the civil war. They helped write the Loam Treaty. I mean, I was absolutely astounded. I actually felt that God was saying to me, just carry on with your interfaith work. It contributes to peace building. And it felt so direct and immediate after having read the book and having said the prayer and then having met Abadu that I suppose that was one of those moments of confirmation for me where I thought I might not really understand that level of human suffering, but that I feel I've had some sort of reply from the divine, whatever you perceive that to be. But we also had further conversations. And he was, you know, we explored free will, and he just said if there's such a thing as free will, it has to be able to go to either extreme. The incredible heroism of a Christian minister who stood in front of the door of the mosque, and the brutality of those that were really fighting over greed, it was over diamonds, etc. So, you know, we explored all of that. So that was one of those moments where I just felt there was divine confirmation and something wonderful had happened. And it then just set me off continuing with my work in interreligious dialogue, which I felt was really important. So the next piece of music is a piece of music I find comforting in those moments of anguish. And while we listen, perhaps, if you wish, you could reflect on the small acts of heroism that you have undertaken in your life and the small acts that perhaps give someone else the courage to carry on. I'm so glad you could hear her. I think my computer's not very good, so I'm hearing it all crackly, and I'm just delighted that you're not hearing it in the way that I am. So the first story was somewhat challenging and speaks to me of the divine knowing the very recesses of our heart and our soul. But the next story is more about human love and connection and brings together two islands as far apart physically as possible, but nonetheless, I think connected now spiritually and always connected spiritually, I'm sure. In September last year, I travelled to the Scottish island of Iona. Interfaith Scotland was co-hosting an Interfaith Climate Week there, and there was lovely participants from all over the world. And one of them happened to be Margaret. So that's where we met at this interfaith week, looking at, how to take care of our planet together from diverse faith traditions. But in October, just like I think it was practically within a week actually of being on Iona, I was traveling to the Pacific island of Samoa. And there, the Commonwealth heads of government were gathering for their biannual meeting. And I had been invited to organise an interfaith service for these Commonwealth heads of government at the Baha'i temple in Samoa. And I had shared this information with the participants on Iona. So here on this beautiful island of Iona, where we were exploring the climate and the impact that climate change is having on islands and so many other things. The wonderful participants said, we want to write a letter from Iona to Samoa. And we want you to take it to Samoa with you and deliver it to the people of Samoa and to the Commonwealth heads of government. No small task. And I was thinking, gosh, how am I going to do this? But I thought, first of all, I'd like to just share with you that letter because I think it was so beautiful. And then I'll tell you what happened when I did. So here's the letter. And it's a message from the island of Iona to the people of Samoa and to the Commonwealth heads of government. We send you greetings from the sacred island of Iona on the Atlantic coast of Scotland. We are people from around the world of diverse religions and beliefs, invited by Interfaith Scotland and the Iona community to spend time together in the ancient abbey on the island. In prayer, pilgrimage, and discussion, we have reconfirmed our commitment to promote climate justice, and we send this message of hope to you. To the people of Samoa and the Pacific, we send our love. Iona is an Atlantic island long suffering wind, rain, and storm, and now facing the greater danger of climate change. We know that you too are threatened by the increased force of tropical cyclones, flooding, rising sea levels, and droughts. And from one island to another, we understand your peril. To Commonwealth heads of government, we say, act now with increased urgency to tackle climate injustice, loss of biodiversity, and all the associated injustices of poverty, gender inequality, and race. We call upon you, in particular, to remember the needs of island communities and their unique heritage and biodiversity, all put in jeopardy by climate change. We call upon you to do these things in the names of our diverse religions and beliefs. So I set off to Samoa was what I kind of felt was a love letter almost from one island, a Scottish island to a Pacific island. In fact, you could not be further physically apart, I don't think, than going from Iona to Samoa. They're literally at opposite sides of the planet. And I had this letter and I was thinking, how am I going to deliver it? And it was incredible. I suppose it was confirmation to me, just the opportunities that I was given. The National University to share the letter there with over 100 people. At the Interfaith service, they invited me after the service to share the letter with over 300 people at the Interfaith service, which was just so incredible. I mean, to the American friends here, I ended up having dinner with an American who was an American senator called Tom Udall, who actually was a really very, very engaged climate activist. But he was then, I think he isn't now. I think he's just newly come away from being the US senator and ambassador to New Zealand and the Pacific. And, read the letter to him and he received it so gracefully. It was just wonderful. There was a famous Papua New Guinean musician that the letter was presented to her. Manu Samoa, if you're into rugby, the manager of the Manu Samoa Rugby Club, faith communities and individuals. And every time the letter was presented, people accepted it with such appreciation, such dignity, and sometimes they were really deeply moved by it as well, to think that there was people gathered on an island at the other side of the world that cared about them at all. And that to me was just something that spoke to me again about connection. It was maybe physical human connection, our human connection with each other, and the fact that we care compassionately about the rest of humankind. But there was a little bit of the divine in there. I felt just that sense that I had been on such a holy island as Iona and met these wonderful people who were moved to write such a lovely letter and then to present that to the people of Samoa. So that falls into my category of it was a confirmation. It was a confirmation for me, and it really worked so well. And so this final piece of music, what I'd love to ask you to do is if you just take a moment and grab a pen and a bit of paper. I'm going to the final prayer. It's actually a prayer I'm going to play. And it's a prayer that Baha'is often sing. And it's a very, very simple one. And it just says, blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island where mention of God has been made and his praise glorified. And this was sung as part of the interfaith service. And it was also sung in Samoan. So I've told you what the words are really about, just blessing the whole planet. So when you hear it in Samoan, sung in Samoan, you'll have a sense of what's being sung. But as it's being sung, I want you to write just a short letter, because there was the theme of the letter from Iona to Samoa. And we'll have, after the prayer, just a couple of minutes of silence and just write a letter of love. It can be a letter to yourself, to our beautiful planet, to someone you love, or indeed it can be a letter of love to the divine. Just take a few moments while we're playing that beautiful Samoan prayer to write a letter.
Amo ia se whanua, ma se fale, ma se no whawanga, ma se ai, ma se loto, ma se maunga, ma se lawhitanga, ma se ana, ma se vanu, ma se lo ele ele, Mase sami, mase motu, mase lofanua. Longa tasi, olo o faya ile tau, tauina. Ole atua, mavi iai, lona mamalu, lona mamalu, lona mamalu, lona mamalu.
Thank you, everyone.
Maureen, what a reminder that we are all threaded together and all connected in such beautiful ways that are so deeply confirming. So grateful for you sharing your stories and those songs and prayer and time together. Thank you for this, Maureen. So very grateful. I will open up this time to anyone who would like to share their thanks or a word with Maureen.